Okay, welcome everyone. It is October 21st, 2024. This is a regular assembly meeting of the Petersburg Borough. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Donna,
Here.
Rob,
Here.
Scott,
Here.
James,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Jay,
Here.
and Bob.
Excused.
Thank you.
Okay, it's now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item on tonight's agenda is approval of minutes. And the first meeting was October 4th, 2024. It was a special assembly meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Next meeting minutes we need to approve is from the meeting on October 7th, 2024. I'd entertain a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
Second.
Second, all those in favor of approving those meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, brings us to tonight's agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented unless anyone has amendments.
I would move to approve the agenda as is.
Aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move forward with the agenda that was presented to us. Next, item 5, public hearings. This is a public hearing for ordinance 2024-17. This is an ordinance amending various sections of chapter 4.28 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Sales Tax to add definitions and rules regarding particular businesses and to specify sales tax exemptions required by law. And it's now time for public testimony on this ordinance, if anybody would like to testify. Is there anyone zooming in this evening?
No, there's no one.
Okay, I see no interest in the audience, so that public hearing is closed. The next public hearing is for ordinance 2024-18. This is an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2025 budget for known changes. It's now time for public testimony in this public hearing if anyone is interested. Seeing none, that public hearing is also closed. There are no bid awards this evening on the agenda. Next item on tonight's agenda is persons to be heard related to items on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak under this item? Seeing none, that brings us to item 8, persons to be heard on items unrelated to tonight's agenda. State your name, who you represent, and I'll remind you there is a 5-minute time limit.
Hello, my name is Joshua Adams. I own 2 tax keys here in Petersburg, and I represent myself and the larger community of Petersburg. I'd say I represent the larger community of Petersburg because even though a lot of people aren't aware of something that's being taken from us, it matters. And it's money out of our pockets. It's also a major judicial liability for Petersburg. Our judgeship is being stolen from us a few years ago during the pandemic, right under our noses. We had a superior judgeship here in Petersburg, which is very important for a number of reasons. But prior to that, let me go back to the history of this. Petersburg has always had a judgeship, almost always back to the very beginning of its founding. Almost as long as it's had a mill, it has had a judgeship. It has had legal representation of some kind, all the way back to when Alaska was a territory and before that. But now we have a magistrate. Magistrate is not a judge. And that is because the superior judgeship for which Ernie Haugen, back in the early 80s, 1981, 1982, fought hard and long to get for Petersburg. Before that, we had a district judgeship, right? A district judgeship is important, but not as important as what we had recently, which was a superior judgeship. The only thing higher than that is a supreme judgeship. Now, to get a superior judgeship, that took months of hard work on Ernie Haugen's part. The namesake, by the way, of Haugen Drive, right? This is Ernie Haugen I'm talking about. Well, during the pandemic, that was taken from us. The judgeship was moved surreptitiously to Ketchikan. And that's a violation of the US Constitution, vis-a-vis the separation of powers doctrine. So it wasn't taken legitimately. Judges don't just get to pick, by the way, where they go. And I think that this is a fight that we can win, or at the very least, we can bargain for something. Let's at least bargain for the district judgeship that we had prior to 1982. I mean, that would be the least that we could get, what we've always had, instead of just having a magistrate. Now, what does it mean to have a magistrate in Petersburg? It means that anything more complex than a DUI cannot be processed here. It means that you don't get a day in court for child custody cases, divorce, patrimony. I mean, all of these, alimony, whatever. You can't get that done here in Petersburg. You have to go to Ketchikan or somewhere else, or Juneau, to deal with it. And that's not fair to us. And it's a huge loss because throughout our history, we've had this. We've had a judgeship here in Petersburg. Now, fiscally, what we lose is about $1 million in revenue that's taxable, because a judgeship comes with a judge, someone living here. It's a high-paying salary. It's the whole retinue that comes with it, the secretaries and the and all the stuff that comes with the judgeship, all the people that work for the judge, and you get your day in court, as opposed to that getting shipped off to somewhere else like Ketchikan. I think that we're important here in Petersburg, and Ketchikan basically said, well, guess what? Petersburg isn't that important. And the judge said the judgeship just basically was shipped over there, with the judges saying, guess what? We get to pick where we want to do business, where we want to have our courts. And we don't want to deal with Petersburg somehow. I mean, I think that you get to live in Petersburg. I think that Petersburg is way better than Ketchikan. Beside the point, we need to prove it to our people by giving them their day in court. This is something that I brought up before, but I see 3 new faces on the assembly, and I'm hoping that you guys, especially you, James, I hope that you guys pay attention to this, because this is our future, especially for the young people in Petersburg. The young ones are going to be getting into trouble. They're going to need their day in court sometime. Not you, though. But anyway, that's really all I have to say, and I was just hoping that this would give a second look. And at the very least, you know, we may not win back our superior judgeship. We should, because it is a clear violation of the separation of powers doctrine. We have a very strong case of getting it back. Again, judges just don't get to pick where they go. Otherwise, they could all be in New York City. We would get nothing. And that's why these laws were set up in the U.S. Constitution, so that we would have balance, we would have balance between the different governing cones. Anyway, yeah, that's really important. And I love Petersburg, and I just see this as something, you know, looking forward that you know, could really affect us in the long term. And if we fight to get this back, I think it'll make us more significant, and it'll also bring in some revenue. So there's that. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on items unrelated to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, will Boards Commission move on to that item 9, Boards Commission and Committee Reports. There are none. There are no items on the consent agenda. That brings us to item 11 on the agenda, Report of Other Officers. And this is a discussion about emergency vehicle insurance by Susan Erickson, the owner of Petersburg Regal Insurance and the broker for the borough's liability insurance.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for all that you guys do. I wasn't at the last meeting, out of town, but I heard there was discussion and a need for clarification. So I'm here to answer every insurance question you have about car insurance. Because I know there are a lot, right? No, it's something people buy and don't pay any attention to. Thus, confusion arises when they start using some technical terms. So let me start at the very beginning. I don't know everybody's understanding of car insurance. We're going to start there. Cars are insured for their current value, right? So I'm driving a 15 Ford F-150. If I total it tonight, I don't get a brand new 2025 F-150, right? And I'm going to get the blue book value, let's say. That's called actual cash value. So, but I put a plow on the front of my truck. I needed to have told somebody, my car's worth just a regular blue book value because there's also a plow on it that cost me $3,500. you know, so now my value is a little bit higher. Okay, clear on that so far. It doesn't include stuff that's in my car, contents in the car. I left my toolbox, I left my jumper cables, I left my whatever I left in the car right before I got in an accident and totaled my car. That's contents. That's your house insurance. That's the borough's property or personal property insurance. Okay, so your vehicle is your vehicle and your permanently installed updates to it. Some people put on nice lights and running boards and all that, stereos, whatever. That's part of the vehicle. But when you crash it, it's depreciated, all of it. Got me on that one? Most vehicles that the city has are insured that way, depreciated value. We're not insured with an insurance company, which is where it gets confusing, even if you understand everything about insurance. It's a pool, so they come up with their own rules, subject to approval by their board and their members. And they have this really awesome thing for fire department, EMS vehicles that they will insure it for the replacement cost or the amount you say it's worth, the lesser of the two. Okay? So vehicles are never insured for replacement cost except APEI, who's our awesome insurance company. They allow it for emergency vehicles, the lesser of what we tell them it's worth or the replacement cost. So what happened in this, I'm surmising since I wasn't here last week, is Ketchikan had a bad fire this last spring and lost several emergency vehicles. They found out, holy mackerel, we didn't have enough insurance to replace those vehicles. So in an effort to say, ooh, we don't want this to happen to us, Steve sent out a note that said, has anybody paid any attention to these vehicles in a while? We need to have a discussion. So at that point, all of the fire trucks had been insured at a certain value. And then Aaron went through and said, whoa, I think we need more. Replace these vehicles. I think that there was a little bit of confusion with what Motor Pool has for replacing them in 2028, which is going to be more. Tracking with me? So we're talking about two different deals. Today, the Pierce fire truck is going to be replaced at $700,000. But for Motor Pool, when we go to replace it, we want it to be 1.2 or whatever. Different numbers, and it all comes together. So fire trucks, also APEI says, the permanently attached equipment, axes, hoses, you know, I'm Jim Stolpe, whatever else is on the trucks permanently is part of that value. But the gear that they don, which may be hanging on the truck, that's contents, okay? So Aaron went through and he said, increase all these vehicles as of the renewal in July. We'd already gotten the renewal pricing, whatever, and then he said, okay, as of July 1, send us another bill for these increased values. So he came up with values. I believe he was thinking about the value in 2028. So we got a bill, which was a lot of money. And then discussion went back and forth, and those values have changed. And I went back, well, let me tell you this first, before I get into the values. I mean, like some of you, I've been working kitty corner for a lot of decades now, and it predates me. How come the city borough only insures fire department and police vehicles for collision and comprehensive? Why is that? I don't know. Goes back, it predates me 38 years. It's always been like that. So I went back and I looked at auto claims back to 2000. That's 25 years ago. And we've had for sure 2 vehicles that we have damaged or have been damaged where we submitted claims. Now, we backed into a lot of people's cars through the years. That's liability. But I really only know 2 vehicles that we've ever had to replace. Neither one of them were insured for physical damage. So in 25 years, the savings for insuring every single vehicle that's driven by the city, you know, you guys can discuss that, but all the fire and police vehicles are all insured for in case they crash into something. I went back and, for example, on our 23 Pierce Pumper, who's our newest vehicle, our purchase price was $605,000. It's insured for $605,000, but we've had it how long now? 2 years? More or less, 2 years. Is that the replacement cost? Probably not. It's probably gonna cost us higher. So initially, the values were increased to $1 million, but it's not gonna cost us $1 million. So recently, all the values were dropped back down to what they feel is a more accurate replacement. So that one went to $650,000, which is it $650,000? I don't know. So does that make sense? Where confusion arose in motor pools replacement fund versus we replace it with a brand new one today, even though it is a 2000 and, well, what's the oldest one? 1994 Pierce Pumper. That's our oldest one, which is insured for $180,000. Maybe we paid $180,000 for it, who knows? But that value was just stepped up to $650,000. So we're gonna pay the difference between the 180 and 650. If that department burns entirely, you know, what are the odds? 0. What are the odds that we total it? Very low. Well, they aren't 0, but you know, it happened in Ketchikan. So that's kind of where the confusion arose on these vehicles, because all of a sudden we got another bill for like $34,000 or something like that. So the values have been adjusted to what department and Steve, I believe, feel are, and Chris was maybe involved in that too, what they feel are accurate replacement costs for the emergency vehicles. I didn't look into it. None of the police vehicles were changed. Police vehicles tend to swap out more quickly than the ambulances though. And so if we just bought a new, can't remember, what do they drive now? It's not Crown Victorias, what are they? Tahoes. You know, we're insuring it for whatever they just paid for it. So that's where all the values come through. So just circling back, if I crash the ambulance tonight, the ambulance is insured for, our new ambulance is $450,000 if I crash it tonight, if I total it. If it cost us $500,000 to actually replace that 3 weeks from now, including the shipping to get it here, that $50,000's coming out of motor pool fund. I mean, but otherwise motor pool fund has nothing at all to do with the insurance. Does that make sense? Donna?
So the difference then would come out of the motor pool fund. So if it's insured for 450, but the replacement is 500, the difference comes out of motor pool.
That's up to you guys to decide, or maybe you say, okay, let's not buy, we only have 450, maybe for 450 we can buy something that'll meet our needs.
Steve, you had a comment?
Yeah, through the, one of the challenges is, so Chris, jump in and say if I get this wrong. We only have right at $1 million in motor pool for the fire department, total for all their vehicles. So we can't jump in too often and bail out a missed target. So that's the biggest challenge, is we don't want to miss that target by much. So if an ambulance is 450 that we're insured for and it's 600,000 to buy a new one, you know, that's 150,000 we don't really want to have to take out of motor pool, because The money in motor pool is designed to replace that ambulance 10 years from now, or whenever the end date of that particular vehicle is. So we try to watch that pretty closely so that we're not drawing from the motor pool. It is an option that most cities don't have, but it's not something we want to take advantage of when, and the main reason for this is because inflation on these emergency services vehicles is insane. I mean, they're going up far faster than anything else that is in our fleet. So we're gonna have to look at these numbers probably every year going forward to make sure we don't get way behind, because then we're pulling money out of motor pool if a truck gets wrecked, that we don't really wanna do it that way. But we have the backstop of the motor pool, but that's not ideal for us. Anyway, so.
I'll temper what Steve said, though. He's right. Actuarially, he's totally right. But I look at probability of loss and severity of loss. Probability of us totaling a fire department vehicle in the last 38 years I can speak to is not high. But there's a balance in there on how much we want to spend and what risk we want to retain.
So in this supplemental budget change, when we found out it was $40,000 more spent on, emergency vehicles, in 38 years, we haven't lost one. If we're lucky, that would be, what, $1.2 million to save if we didn't pay that $40,000 a year? I mean, so I guess we need to decide where you insure them at, what value you insure them at.
And and Susan mentioned it, after the meeting, I went back and worked with staff and we lowered those values. So for example, we had 4 of the Pierce pumpers all up at $1 million. I dropped them all to 650. Guys, that's a shot in the dark to a certain extent. I mean, I'm basing that on the fact that we bought a new one for 605 a year or two ago. That's probably good enough for right now, when exactly as Susan, as the mayor, you mentioned, that we haven't wrecked one in a long, basically, memory. So I've asked Susan to work with API to get the new rates for those lower values. She was out of town. She's been great to keep in touch with us, but I don't have a number for you today. That's the challenge.
So I think that was the concern at the last meeting by of some Assembly members, why it was such a big increase. It was $15,000 originally and it went up by 40 or something.
Yeah, yes, sir.
If my numbers are right, so.
If adjusted, would we receive a kickback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
And I just don't have that number. I requested it, but, they haven't gotten back to us yet.
So it currently has been adjusted. We're waiting on what the adjustment is. It'll still be up, but maybe not $40,000 up. So then.
It'll definitely be up. One, if I can throw out one other thing, do we care about the pickup trucks having comp and collision on them? I don't know. That's fire department to say. A lot of numbers though, it gets confusing, and I'm happy to come back anytime about car insurance, property insurance, whatever, and try and break it down so it's manageable and understandable.
Explains to me how we got to the $40,000 increase for insuring the newer trucks for, $500,000 more than we bought the last one for.
Roger that.
So that would run the insurance bill up substantially, I would think. So,
And I think the confusion was what it's going to be to replace them, maybe what they have right now for motor pool, I don't know. But yeah, I can see how that happened for sure.
so I've got, since we're talking motor pool insurance, I have a question for the manager that just popped into my head. All the departments, enterprise funds pay into the motor pool.
Not just enterprise funds, general fund as well.
So the general fund, that's
Mhm.
what my point I was trying to get at was the general fund pays into the motor pool for the police and fire cars.
Public Works, vehicles, admin vehicles, yes. Yeah. It's why, because it has, I mean, that's why how we set those values has a big impact because we charge that back to different departments. So if we overshoot that, that department's getting charged more. It's not money wasted, it goes into the account, but it makes it harder to balance the budget for everybody that's trying to do that. So it's a tough argument because we don't always know. I mean, a lot of our vehicles have specialty features that aren't just, you can't just call someone saying, give me a price, and 20 minutes later have a price on what it's gonna cost you. You know, our patrol cars, for example, are outfitted with various things that may be different than what another community has. So it's not off the shelf pricing. Same with fire trucks. I mean, it took them a very long time to get it nailed down on exactly what type of fire truck with exactly what type of options they wanted to order. And that's part of what makes them expensive. So anyway, we're gonna have to, Chris and the motor pool, we're only booking 40% of probably, in a sense, what we should have. We're purposely doing that to not have a big balance and do not hit the general fund or the utility funds with bigger price tags than we want to have to pay for. So, you know, we're managing risk, as Susan said, by saying we're only going to apply a 40%, you know, to that, and we're not going to have a full replacement. So for 4 pumpers, and let's say by the time you go to replace them, they're $1 million each. That means we should have $4 million in the motor pool fund. We've got $1 million. So we're trying to balance that to the best of our ability, but it can hurt. I mean, Ketchikan found it out the hard way. You know, a fire station, I think, is what burned up with vehicles in it. And now they're, you know, finding themselves not insured enough to replace their fleet.
Any other questions of Susan or manager? Topi.
So just to inform you a little bit about the new truck, the department went out of its way to hold the cost down. We picked instead of picking the queen of the fleet, we dumbed ourselves down. And just so you know that's how we came up with a 750, but the 1.2 million is it's not even the top of the line rig. And the next couple of trucks that are coming up are going to be probably in the 900 price range. You've got one coming up shortly. And on top of that, the replacements, we were subjugated to moving from 20-year replacement to 30-year replacement. Well, it got kind of bogged down a little bit, and it should have been an incremental space, so it isn't costing the borough back to back to back. It should have been spaced out a little more evenly to help the borough. But just so you know, we didn't throw all the bells and whistles at that truck that we could have. I mean, there are some things that we should have put on there, but we're adding stuff on our own. We install stuff on our own, not having them do it, which saves the community money. So and the replacement value, I mean, it only takes one time going around one of the S corners, hit a black ice patch, end comes around. It happens all the time throughout the states. There's rollovers all the time, and it's guys swerve to miss a kid on a bicycle. Truck rolls over, 3 firefighters go to the hospital, and your truck lays on its side totaled. So, and I don't think it's unrealistic to move that money a little farther up the ladder to replace these vehicles. Thank you.
Input, any other input? Thank you, Susan, for
Very
coming
welcome.
and explaining some stuff to us that we didn't understand. We still don't, but more so now than before. Okay, mayor's report. next on the agenda. Okay, we're seeking letters of interest. The Petersburg Borough is accepting letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community as board members to the Southeast Alaska Power Agency for the calendar year 2025. The Borough Assembly will appoint one voting member and one alternate to the SEPA board for next year. Letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the Borough offices located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by sending them to Post Office Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And we're also seeking letters of interest. The Borough is accepting letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community by filling one of the vacant seats on the following borough boards until the October 2025 municipal election. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, there's one vacant seat, and the Planning Commission, there's also one vacant seat. And those applications can be sent to the clerk at the address I just read off. When I was at the Southeast Conference, they were talking about Southeast Conference in Alaska Heat Smart Award. They were awarded $38.6 million in federal grant funding for energy efficient heat pumps. Southeast Conference, in partnership with Alaska Heat Smart, received this award through the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program to help families offset the cost of converting from residential oil heating systems to energy efficient heat pumps in Alaska's southern and central coastal communities. For more information, contact Robert Venables, Executive Director of Southeast Conference, at 907-586-4360 or robert@southseconference.org. So I thought that was kind of interesting to pass that information along, and maybe people can afford to get a heat pump now because I believe the borough still has a rebate program as well. So Mayor's report, and turn it over to the manager for his report.
Thank you, sir. Fire Department is hosting an EMT 1 initial class started tonight. That's where Aaron is tonight. This course will take place nights and Saturdays until November 14th. Learn Not to Burn was October 7th through the 11th. Thank you to Keegan Green, Kayla Perry, Heather Kanik, and Cindy Lakadakis for making it a success this year. Colby Holder was hired as our new EMS coordinator. He will start on the 4th of November and will be a great addition to the team. Thanks to Patrick Lane, who stepped in to help catch us up on EMS coordinator duties in preparation for Colby to start. Friendly reminder to folks to check the batteries in their smoke detector when they change their clocks back for daylight savings time. And the fire department will be handing out glow sticks and candy in Severson subdivision and other areas during Halloween. Residents at elderly housing will also be handing out candy in the lobby of elderly housing on Halloween from 6 to 8. Please come in through their patio entrance to at the south end of the building, as we've got some repair going on the main entrance. Speaking of that, Steelhead Construction received approval from the state fire marshal on the emergency, elderly housing entrance repair project. Please drive slowly in the parking lot and carefully around the building and refrain from blocking the emergency access route. Power and Light is auditing customers. We'll be sending out letters to customers that must move their meters to an accessible location for maintenance and reading, or have temporary services that needed to be upgraded to a permanent code compliant meter base. For customers who get letters from the utility director, they can call 907-772-4203 with any questions. Pump Station 4 Forest Main project. Invitations to bid have been prepared, and Chris Cottle will be taking over the project at this point. Carl is still involved with finalizing the remaining land acquisition processes, but the Public Works Office will manage the project through bidding and construction. Remember, boat owners, harbor staff will be cleaning up floats of water hoses and clutter to make way for snow removal. Also remember to call the harbor office with boat watching information as vessel owners start to travel out of town. Harbor Maintenance has been working to track down a water line leak in the South Harbor. Staff appreciate the customer's patience, and we are inspecting the line for cracks and damaged areas. Staff's also been working with the borough attorney to draft language for code changes to permanent moorage contracts to protect the borough from derelict vessel situations. These changes have been reviewed by the Harbor Advisory Board and will come before the Assembly on a future agenda. Harbor staff has been working with the CEO of American Cruise Lines to partner with the borough to develop conceptual drawings that we used at a future community open house and a work session with the assembly and staff. We got approval this morning from them that they're willing to pay half the cost, American Cruise Lines. So we've notified P&D and he'll get started on it and start getting questions back to the harbor and our staff as well as American Cruise Lines. Water fountain has been placed up on the mezzanine of the Aquatic Center. This will be greatly appreciated by our patrons and employees alike. We've had upcoming limited open swims and cancellations due to significant loss of lifeguards for traveling, school, et cetera. We're lining up another lifeguard course that we held in early to mid-November. Please help spread the word as to we need to get some people trained for lifeguards and be able to open up all of our open swims that we like. We are gearing up for our annual Halloween hustle at Parks and Rec and are looking forward to a pumpkin plunge again this year. Pumpkins have been donated by Bennett McGrath and the Pumpkin Patch. Please keep an eye out around Parks and Rec facility and Facebook posts for updates on these events and our dive-in movie events for the season. Parks and Rec has continued partnership with Petersburg Medical Center for another session of bingo size. Please contact PMC for involvement in this wonderful class that has been proven to help with fall prevention. Julie Anderson, Aaron Hankins, and Stephanie Payne were all certified by the Alaska Office of Boating Safety in conjunction with the U.S. Coast Guard at the Alaska Recreation and Parks Association Conference in Wrangell this September. They'll be conducting the Kids Don't Float and cold water survival programming. Wow. Our local dirt roads, they're actually working on them today, so I'll give them credit for that. They got some pretty poor conditions. We just had a lot of rain at the wrong time. Graders was out most of the day, and we'll continue going through that as long as the weather holds. We'll start to get things graded and potholes filled. We have gotten word from Seacon that they're planning to have a paving plant in town during the construction season in 2026. Public Works is gathering information on paving costs and funding options, including a possible grant. The potential costs are eye-opening, to say the least. If we can piggyback on top of when Seacon comes, it's for a Forest Service project. We can maybe avoid the mobilization and demob costs, and our money goes a little farther that way. So it was not really on our radar until we heard that they were coming to town. Some garbage bear activity does continue, but overall the community is doing a much better job of keeping garbage secure, thanks to everyone who had stepped up their game in this regard. The Public Works crew is working on adding a small mezzanine storage area to the Public Works parking garage. This will allow us to get some supplies and equipment into dry storage and out of the weather. Assistant Director Morrell and Supervisor Mike Bell are working with EPA to get the Clearwell replacement project rolling. The Clearwell is a 280,000 gallon open top tank behind the water plant that stores processed water for backwashing, the water filters and other plant operations. It's also the water supply for the borough's baling facility. The borough recently received a $1.6 million grant to fund this project, and we've also allocated $400,000 in the water department reserves if needed. And we are still waiting for the final version of the wastewater discharge permit to come back from EPA. There'll be a significant cost associated with the new permit. Well, we know that some of those costs are going to be, we don't yet know what the final schedule will be for required changes. And as we start to know more, we'll let the assembly know. And thanks to the voters for approving the infrastructure portion of the bond issues, because that's where some of that money will have to come from if we don't get grants. Anyway, that's it.
Any questions of the manager on his report? Seeing none, thank you, Manager Giesbrecht. That brings us to item 14, unfinished business. First item there is an ordinance 2024-17, an ordinance amending various sections of chapter 4.28 of the Petersburg Municipal Code entitled Sales Tax to add definitions and rules regarding particular businesses and to specify sales tax exemptions required by law. This is the second reading. If adopted in 3 readings, it will enhance chapter 4.28 by adding needed definitions and rules being used but not listed in code, and by specifying sales tax exemptions required by state or federal law. This ordinance was passed unanimously in its first reading. I'd entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2024-17 in its second reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by member Marsh, seconded by member Newman. Discussion. Call the roll.
Rob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Donna.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2417 passes unanimously in its second reading. That brings us to another ordinance that is in its second reading, and that's ordinance 2024-18. This is an ordinance adjusting fiscal year 2025 budget for known changes. This is the second reading. Entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its second reading.
Make a motion to approve the ordinance to adjust the FY 2025 budget for known changes.
Motion been made by member Marsh, seconded by member Newman. Also, if you look down farther in your packet, you'll see there are three proposed motions to change values of the three different parts, and the clerk listed them out for us. So is there any other discussion on this ordinance or proposed amendments? And I guess we should mention that the insurance adjustment that we just talked with Susan Erickson about was passed in the first reading, but now that number is going to be less than 40,000, but we don't know the figure. So, Member Stan Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move to add clarifying language to the Denali grant 10% match to provide that non-payroll expenses will come from the property development fund.
Second. Motion been made by member Stanton Gregor, seconded by member Swartz. Discussion on that amendment. Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Amendment to this ordinance has been made, and go ahead. Yeah. Member
Thank you,
Stanton
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would also move to reduce 20,000 additional expense in the water department's machinery and equipment line item to 15,000 for a budgeted total of $20,000.
Second.
Motion been made by member Stanton Gregor, seconded by member Marsh. Any discussion on this proposed amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Rob,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna.
Yes.
Thank you.
Stanton Gregor, would you care to make the?
Sure, gladly, Mr. Mayor. I would move to remove the addition of $10,000 to the wastewater professional services line item, which was set to be used to hire a diver to locate the wastewater plant outfall.
Second.
Stanton Gregor, seconded by member Marsh to make that amendment to line item 3. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Rob,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have the ordinance 2024-18 as amended 3 times before us. Is there any discussion on the ordinance as amended? Discussion, clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2024-18 passes 6-0 on its second reading. That brings us to item 15 on the agenda this evening, new business. First item under new business is ordinance 2024-19. Excuse me. This is an ordinance amending chapter 4.3 of the Petersburg Municipal Code, Alaska Remote Seller Sales Tax Code. If approved in 3 readings, this ordinance will adopt the Uniform Alaska Remote Sellers Sales Tax Code by reference and provide that the Assembly ratify subsequent amendments to the Uniform Code within 120 days of adoption by the Alaska Remote Seller Sales Tax Commission. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Marsh, seconded by member Stan Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll definitely be voting yes on this one, but for those listening at home, the language might seem a bit confusing. I was wondering if I could put the finance director on the spot to kind of briefly explain to those listening at home what this actually means in real life. Please and thank you.
all of the communities that have the remote seller sales tax have to adopt these also within 120 days. So what we are doing is, because right now their code is in our code. So if you want to make these modifications, you have to do it in 3 readings. Well, what we're going to do for the future is we're going to remove it from our code, talk about it by reference. And so every time they make a change again in the future, I'll bring it to you to ratify, but it'll just be by resolution in 1 reading. So, I mean, we have to adopt these changes anyway, and it shouldn't have to take 3 readings to do it. Seems a little overkill. So that's what we're doing with this.
Thank you, Director Tao.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Member Marsh.
Thank you. I have a question. Do we know how many amendments this body makes as far as amendments and changes?
Since it started about 5 or 6 years ago, this is the 2nd time, I believe.
So it's not as if they're doing it on a regular basis several
it's
times a
not.
year. Okay.
And I think it's a good idea to go down this path like you're proposing, is to do it by resolution in the future. I
Well,
mean,
and the language does say ratify, so
right.
you can decide whether you want to adopt it, the future changes by resolution or by ordinance, if you wanted, to vote on it 3 different times.
Any other discussion on ordinance 2024-19? Clerk, please call the roll.
Donna,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2024-19 passes unanimously in its first reading. That brings us to item B under new business, ordinance 2024-20. This is an ordinance amending chapter 14.30 Mountain View Manor Elderly Housing and Assisted Living Facility to institute a new assisted living community facility fee to be used for facility maintenance and repair, to require that 2-bedroom assisted living units be occupied by 2 residents, and to increase certain fees. If this ordinance is approved in 3 readings, we'll create a one-time community facility fee of $2,000 for new residents moving into the facility, which will be used for facility maintenance and repair. Will require that future rented 2-bedroom assisted living units be occupied by 2 residents. Increase the assisted living food cost from $350 a month to $450 per month. We'll add a security deposit and pet registration fee for assisted living units, and will provide for late fees. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
Second.
Motion been made by member Newman, seconded by member Marsh. And I listened to the Borough Business Call-In show today, and the manager was on there, and he explained that some of these, it's not like it's gonna be cut and dried in stone, like the pet fee. Can you go over that again before we start?
Sure. We're basically kind of grandfathering the folks who are already up there. So other than on like food, for example, that will go up for everybody with notice. But the facility fee and some of the other things that are covered in this, we will apply that to new residents, not the existing residents. So the double occupancy, we won't, somebody that's in a double room by themselves, we are not going to add a second person to their room. We will work that out with future as we have turnover up there. As you all know, we lose a substantial amount of money in assisted living, and transferred, over 300,000 from the general fund to assisted living to keep it afloat. We can't keep doing that. We'd hoped that the sales tax would pass. It did not. So we have to, we're really looking for ideas on how to maximize our general fund balances. So one of them is to have transfer less money from the general fund to assisted living. The changes that are being proposed to you will, once fully implemented, meaning we've got all new residents that are paying the higher fees, brings in, based on their service plan, over $300,000 a year annually. I did a quick spreadsheet for each of you that set it on the desk. So it's not a small amount of money. Again, it's not going to happen right away because we're grandfathering these folks, but it's a start in the right direction if we want to try to make that facility whole and keep them from having to take money from the general fund.
Thank you for that explanation. Any discussion on ordinance 2024-20?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll definitely be voting yes on this in its first reading. We have 6 weeks of discussion on this topic. As far as the manager discussed, as far as enterprise funds go, this one does not run on the black as where all others do, and we are subsidizing it from the general fund. I don't like seeing rates going up on services, but I also want to make sure we have an assisted living here in Petersburg. And not to put it in such black and white terms, but if we want to actually keep this facility, I am no mathematician, but I also saw no other way to, besides subsidizing from the general fund, besides raising fees on that. And based on that, I think it's something we need to do to keep that facility sustainable. Thank you.
Discussion. Clerk, call the roll.
James,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance passes unanimously as well, and that brings us to ordinance 2024-21. This is an ordinance amending chapter 16.16, Tidelands of the Petersburg Municipal Code to provide for updated provisions regarding the disposal of tidelands and submerged lands. Because the economic value of Petersburg's tidelands is great, this ordinance is written to provide that the sale of tidelands shall not be made for consideration less than the appraised full and true value rather than the assessed value, and to clarify the sale process to ensure any sale of tidelands is in the borough's best interest. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Myers, second. Proposed amendment to this ordinance that was given to us by our attorney today, I believe. So if we want to start off with that.
You looked at me, Mr. Mayor. You want me to go for it?
Some else want to read it?
I got it. No worries. I'm just teasing with you.
I know.
All right, I move to amend section 16.16.075C by replacing the strike-through language with the following new wording. So I'll read it out here. It'll now read like this. The Planning Commission and the Harbor Board shall each provide their written report on the referral to the Assembly within 100 days of the date of referral. Now for the new language. If the Harbor Board is not scheduled to meet within 100 days of the referral or cannot otherwise provide a timely report to the Assembly, the Board Chair shall promptly notify the Borough Clerk, and the Assembly may, in its discretion, 1, grant the Harbor Board additional time, or 2, proceed with a public hearing and decision without a report from the Harbor Board prior to the expiration date of 100 days.
Second to that proposed amendment.
Second.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment. Clerk, call the roll. Oh, Member Stanton Gregory.
Yeah, just for those listening at home, not to be redundant, but there's been times in our history where sometimes all these boards can't get together to vet a project and people end up waiting longer than they need to for often what happened with planning and zoning and building permits and such. And on the off chance it went this direction with tidelands, it helps ensure, nobody's left holding the bag for 6 months waiting to hear back from us. Just wanted to clarify it.
Any other input? Member Schwartz.
I'd like to hear from Gloria Ann on this. Glo, what are your thoughts on this one?
Hello.
There you
Well,
go.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I think it's great. I think, a lot of times things happen in the spring and the harbor board isn't able to actually meet. So this would, with the availability of the assembly, they could come up with a decision. So thank you.
Thanks, Cole.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Any other discussion on the proposed amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2024-21 passes unanimously in its first reading, and I'd like to
That was just the amendment part,
oh, that's the amendment.
just to keep it tight.
That's good. We need to be on the right track. Thank you for correcting me. So that brings us back to the main motion to, as amended for this ordinance, 2024-21. Any discussion on the amended ordinance? Clerk, call the roll.
James,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'd like to remind people, if there's people listening, about this is the first reading of these ordinance under new business. The next reading, the second reading will also involve a public hearing, so, and then we'll move on to a third reading. So there's 6 weeks of time to digest all of these ordinances and have time for public input. Okay, that brings us to item D under new business. Excuse me, resolution 2024-13, and this is a resolution authorizing the borough manager to apply to the state of Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation for a loan from the Alaska Drinking Water Fund and Alaska Clear Water Fund for the project entitled Scow Bay Haul Out and Workyard. Approval of this resolution will authorize Manager Giesbrecht to apply for a ADEC loan for the Scow Bay Haul Out Workyard project and to execute the loan agreement. I'd entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by member Marsh, seconded by member Valentine. Discussion. Member Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've got these two different funds, the Alaska Drinking Water Fund, the Alaska Clean Water Fund. Could you explain why we need two of them rather than one? Is it just by definition, or are there limit amounts on one over the other? I wonder if you give some more background on that, please.
Looks like the community development director.
Right, through the mayor, it's the way Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation sets up their loan program. They get federal money from EPA to do this revolving loan, and so they've divided it into clean water, which takes care of all wastewater projects, and drinking water, which is potable water. This project has both components. We're running a main for drinking water, not necessarily for drinking, but potable water, and then also one for wastewater. So then you have to apply to both loan programs.
Makes sense.
Not really, but that is what the way it is.
Thank you for that clarification. And then, again, at the Rural Business Show I listened to today when I was home for lunch, Manager Giesbrecht explained that we apply for this loan and the state at times will forgive some of it. So can you explain that so the people that didn't hear the radio show?
Yeah, I mean, we've used this kind of program many times here in the borough. And on occasion, they have forgiven the principal. There's no guarantee. And these days with the state budget, I would have to probably say it's probably less likely than it was years ago. But it is a really good program with good interest rates. And it's a way to get these kind of projects done. And I just want to, again, thank the voters for approving that as part of the bond issue that was done. So allows us to keep this Scow Bay project moving forward to the point where phase one is close to done, Liz?
Oh, well, not done, but close to funded. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
So
on
it's a big deal. I mean, this is a project that's been talked about. I've been here for 13 years and every year we've talked about Scow Bay Boatyard. So
exciting to see funding coming together. So if we move forward on this part of it, this phase of it, that will help too. And maybe this is something we could mention to our senator and representative when we're lobbying the legislature this winter to give us a break and take the principal away. So anyway, any other discussion on resolution 2024-13? Clerk, please call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 2024-13 passes unanimously this evening. Letter E under new business, letter of support for the U.S. Forest Service Thomas Bay stewardship proposal. Petersburg District Ranger Case is requesting a letter of support to use stewardship contracting for the Thomas Bay Young Growth Timber Sale Project authorized earlier this year. Stewardship contracting would enable the trade of goods, potentially timber, for services, proposed work activities. Please see the proposal from Ranger Case attached to this packet. So I'd entertain a motion to approve this letter of support.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Valentine, seconded by member Stanton Gregor. Excuse me, discussion. Clerk, please call the roll.
Scott,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sending a letter of support for this stewardship proposal. Item 16, communications. We don't read the communications that are sent to us at the meeting, but if people are interested to see what they are, you can go on the website and look on the agenda, and they are listed there. So item 17, any assembly discussion items? Assembly member comments? Recognitions, any assembly members or staff have recognitions this evening? Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to recognize Gloria Ann Wallen and the Harbor Department on completing the removal of 4 derelict boats from the harbor. I know it's been a long time coming. Seeing those departing the harbor was a good feeling to see that getting taken care of. So again, thanks to the harbor master and her staff and all those that had supported that process. It's good to have it done.
You're here. Yeah, I saw the Pacific Queen go by my house the other day, and I was just hoping it makes the trip all the way to Hoonah. So, any other recognitions? Member Marsh.
I would like to recognize Principal Heather Kahn for her national recognition. That's quite an accomplishment for her. She's definitely put some effort and time in and a lot of heart in for the children of Petersburg.
Good recognition. Any other recognitions this evening? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anybody want to stay? No?
I'll take her.
Very good.